Okay, everyone. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do before we begin is to say a big thank you for watching or listening. And I'm going to say that it's Liam Hartery back with you with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. This is episode 481. Believe it or not, very surreal to say that, but it is. And thank you all for staying tuned to all of these exciting episodes we've been doing over the past 4.5, 5 years, whatever it is now. I've lost track. And today I'm joined by a very, very special guest. I'm joined by six-time world champion, gold medalist, and Olympic athlete Anna Hemmings, who is also a motivational speaker and has competed in both marathon and sprint kayaking. So today we're going to be talking about her incredible achievements, winning multiple medals, as I've said, multiple gold medals, silver as well, competing in Olympic Games, reaching such a high level in such a skilled sport, and the life lessons that she's learned along the way, which is really why I create these interviews, is to inspire you, the viewers, the listeners, to pursue your dreams, your goals, whether it's in sports or whether it's in something completely different, education, entrepreneurship, anything that you'd like to do in life. Some of these lessons are applicable in all situations. So stay tuned for some great content, some inspirational content. And Anna, I would like to say a really big thank you to you and really appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully I've done that justice, but you've achieved a lot. So we'll talk more about that shortly. But the most important thing, thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. It really is because you're a very inspirational person. And it's one of those things with my podcasting that if someone has achieved a lot, but they just want to come on here and say how great they are, I don't have them on here. Whereas in your case, because you give back and you contribute to so many people and you make a positive impact on so many people, that's really the reason. And I think that's wonderful because people need a lot of guidance these days. So we will touch more on that. But before we do, I would like to touch very briefly on your beginnings in the kayaking sport because I don't want to dwell too long on this, but I do want to touch on it because people see where you're at today, having won so many things, but they don't always realize that the beginnings can be very humble and we all have to start somewhere. So, if it's okay with you, I would like to touch on where you were first inspired to get involved in your sport and how it all began for you, please.
So my sport isn't one that I was going, Mom, please take me kayaking. It's not a sport you do in school, and I stumbled on it really. My mom picked up a leaflet saying, "Come and try kayaking." It was in the summer holidays. I think it was something, to get us out of the house and keep us busy for a week. And I went along with my brother to Elmbridge Canoe and Kayak Club in Weybridge in Surrey, and we did the course for a week. We loved it. It was a week of sunshine on the River Thames. We were splashing about in the kayaks and really just, had a great time on the water. And that was where it began. And then we joined for a month. We did this trial membership, loved that. And then and it went from there. And I was just really lucky that I happened to live near Elmbridge Canoe Club and it was just down the road, and it was also one of the best clubs in the country at the time. So I was just lucky that we found it and it was thriving and it was really competitive. There was lots of club races with other clubs, and that really played to my competitive nature. But it really just began as a summer holiday activity.
Wow, that is amazing. You see what I mean? People don't realize that. They see you in the Olympics, they see the World Championships, but they don't always realize how these things begin. And to go a little bit deeper into that as well, Anna, I mean, did you ever have any expectations at that time of how far you would go? Because you mentioned that about some holiday activity and, you sound very humble, but and you mentioned about the competitive nature and it bringing out the best in you, which is very cool. But did you ever dream that you would get as far as you have with Olympics and world championships and all of that kind of thing?
So I'd had a dream of competing at the Olympics from the age of about 8 or 9, when I watched the Seoul Olympics in 90, no, no, sorry, Los Angeles in 84. And I watched that and I fell in love with the Olympics and wanted to become an Olympian. I didn't know what sport that was going to be. And if I'm honest, I probably thought I was going to be a runner. But because that's what you watch at the Olympics, isn't it? Mostly back then. In those days, it was all about the running. Now we see a whole variety of different sports. But um, but when I joined the kayak club, no, I didn't join it that week and think, oh, this is gonna be my sport. I'm gonna be a world champion. It was a year or two later when I started to think, actually, I really love this. I'm actually quite good at it. And what really inspired me was about 4 years later, there were athletes at my club who went to the Seoul Olympics in '88, and they went off, and the sport is small, and my club was small in comparison to some other sports clubs. And these athletes who were going off to the Olympics were people who I saw in the clubhouse, in the changing room, on the water. They were just regular people who had clearly worked really hard. But I just thought of them as normal people who were doing extraordinary things. And I was just inspired by that. People were going away, competing at Olympics, coming back. One of the girls gave me one of her Team GB t-shirts, so it was really inspiring. And it made me think that competing at the Olympics was a possibility. So yeah, that was inspirational.
That's incredible. That is absolutely amazing. I mean, it's something I love to do with these talks is get more into the mindset and get into the behind the scenes because what you said there is really valuable about athletes. People don't always see them as people, as strange as that sounds. People don't always see the behind the scenes, the human aspect. So I love to humanize things with these talks, if that makes sense. So it's a very valuable insight that you shared. Okay, so going forward a little bit, I mean, with everything that you've won, now I would love to talk about every competition, but we would be here until, sometime next week, I think, with that. So I think the best way to break it down now is when you look back on everything you've achieved, as I've already said, multiple world championships, the Olympic Games and everything, it would be good to talk about some of the moments that are your favorites or the ones that you are the most proud of? And I'm aware that's a very big question, but again, going behind the scenes, getting inside your head to us from a certain perspective as to which ones are your favorite memories or your most special memories, I think will be the best way to break this down because I'm fascinated by how you discern between them, having won so many things, if that makes sense where I'm going with this one. Would you mind giving us an insight into that, please, Anna? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Liam. I won 6 world championships, and trying to pick which is my favorite or the most special is actually really difficult. I'll give you probably a couple of answers really, and the first one is always really special. When I did start to dream of becoming a world champion, then you finally do it. That has to be special. It's something that, I at the age of about 10, 11 started thinking, actually, this could be a possibility. This is what I really want to do. And then you set your heart on it. But it takes another 10, 11 years for it to happen. It's not something that happens overnight. And I came second twice at the World Championships, 2 times in a row. So when you finally, and losing by small margins, I was losing by like half a second after a 2.5 hour race, so it was really, really close, twice leading up to the one that I won. So then when you finally do it, that was really special. And I remember coming off the water and I burst into tears. Big hugs from my coach, my family, and it was, yeah. So that was a special moment. But I think what was important was recognizing, when I look back now, that journey to get there was what was really powerful, because I did lose along the way, but I learned from it. I learned what to do differently. I kept losing on the sprint finish. So I worked on my speed, because it's a marathon race. You think, oh, we need to work on endurance, we need stamina. And so we did a lot of that. I was brilliant at endurance. No one could drop me on a marathon, and I would be there till the very end, but I wasn't able to win on the sprint finish. So we had to change the training and do things differently, because working on speed when you're a marathon racer doesn't make sense. But that's where I was losing the race. Also, in marathon kayak racing, you have to do something called a portage, where you have to get out of the boat, you pick it up, you run for like 60 to 100 meters, and you do that 3 or 4 times in a race. And actually, I realized that was a strength for me. I was a good runner, a very quick runner, and I realized that was an opportunity for me to break away. So this was about recognizing what are my strengths and harnessing those strengths. So whilst I did work on the speed, it was also about what are the strengths that I can really build on and sharpen those strengths. And that's what I did. And actually, the first World Championships that I won, I broke away on the portage, and I managed to win without having to do the sprint finish. So that was really special. But it was about learning how to do things differently in order to win, rather than just plugging away at the same thing. It was about daring to be a little to think a little bit outside the box, to think differently, and to be prepared to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and try new things. So that made that really special. And then it's really tricky because there's also, I won one World Championships in the doubles in the K2 with my partner Helen Gilby. And so winning in the doubles was really special when you're with someone else, and it was quite unexpected. We hadn't prepared for that really all year. Someone dropped out, and there was an opportunity for us to race in the doubles. I was always doing the singles. So I then went on to win the singles, and the next day won the doubles. And so that was pretty unique. Not many people, well, no one in Great Britain had ever done that, won both singles and doubles in one weekend. So that made that really special. And it was surprising as well. We kind of went into the race going, we'll just give it our best shot. We'll do, as best as we can. And then we came away with gold medal, and I came away with two. So that was also very special. And if I'll just give you one more, I know you asked me for my favorite one, and I'm giving you lots of answers here, but the third race that I also cherished was I had at the peak of my career, I was diagnosed with an illness called chronic fatigue syndrome, and I was out of the sport for 2 years, and I was told that I would by doctors that there was no recovery, no treatment, and probably never going to race again. And so, I mean, that's something that I can dive into a little bit more depth later on. But I then recovered from that illness, and eventually, and it was a big battle, not just physically to recover and to come back and reach the highest level in my sport, but mentally and emotionally, it was really, really tough to go from being the best in the world at the highest level in your sport to rock bottom, where I couldn't paddle in my kayak for more than 15 minutes at a time, gently, like going for a brisk 15-minute walk. That's the equivalent. I couldn't at some point hold my arms on my hair to wash my hair in the shower and hold them up on my head. It was too painful. My muscles were in too much pain. And so to come from that and then build the confidence to come back and race again at the highest level. And I did, and I came back and I won the World Championships after recovering from that illness. And so that was really special to actually come back and do that when I doubted, others doubted, I doubted, my confidence needed rebuilding, to believe that I could do that again. That was really special. And I think if I have to pick one, that's probably the one that means the most, because it was the biggest mountain that I had to climb to get there. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
It's a wonderful answer, though. Beautiful answer. Because what I said before, going behind the scenes and, realizing the things that people don't realize just from watching you compete or just from reading the articles or anything like this. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And yes, the chronic fatigue aspect, I would love to go deeper into that. I mean, let's touch on something with that first, that it's a very misunderstood condition. And I would like to briefly mention that. I mean, I suffer from Crohn's disease and B12 anemia, and a couple of things related to that. So the element of being extremely fatigued and being, bedridden for periods of time, I actually understand to a degree on a personal level, by the way, and not to go off topic there. But in terms of, I know it's different to chronic fatigue, but still, it can have a similar end result. But in terms of actually the condition itself, I mean, what do you attribute that to? Do you attribute it to the intensity of your training and the pressure of competition or that sort of thing? Or is that a cliche perspective? And is there something much deeper that you feel influenced your diagnosis, if you don't mind me asking? Because it would be very valuable to raise a little bit of awareness of the condition as well, I think.
So chronic fatigue syndrome is something that 250,000 people in the UK have been diagnosed with or are diagnosed with. And that's not including the people who haven't been diagnosed, and it's very difficult to diagnose. because there's no blood test or anything. So it's not exclusive to athletes, and it's not specifically about overtraining, because otherwise non-athletes wouldn't get it as well. So in the beginning, the sports doctors did assume that I'd overtrained. And, when an athlete complains of fatigue and muscles aching, they think you've overtrained, and that's a natural assumption. But actually, by the time, and I'd had episodes of this fatigue and muscle pain and achiness for about a year and a half before I was actually had to stop altogether. But episodes of like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 week periods. And every time it happened, the doctor said, "Oh, you're overtraining." So every time I was reducing the amount of training that I was doing. And by the time I eventually stopped, I was really not doing a big volume of training, not compared to anyone else. So I was like, it can't be about overtraining, because I'm literally not doing the volume of training that others are doing. And I actually, when I recovered from the illness, went back and trained harder and greater volume and intensity than I ever did before. So it's not about overtraining. It's not about burnout as such, although some people that might contribute to them having fatigue, but in a non-athlete capacity. So it is quite misunderstood, and there are many different what should we say, on different perspectives on what causes it and why it happens. I did a treatment called reverse therapy, and that was based on the assumption that the mind and the body are intrinsically linked, and that the symptoms are there to, almost like alarm bells, to alert you to things that are going on in your life that your body doesn't like. So that might be pressures, it might be your pace of life, it might be relationships, it might be environment, it might be non-expression of emotion. And it's been researched a lot over the last 20 years that repressed emotion is a big cause of unexplained pain. So yeah, that's a little insight. I mean, I don't want to go into loads of depth. That's probably not relevant to lots of people, but yeah, it's those are some of the things. And so it's about the body's way of saying, we need to change some things here. We need to change what's going on and how you go about your life, because your body's not happy. And this is its way of communicating that to you.
Makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Very inspirational coming back from that, Anna. The story you told there, I mean, absolutely incredible. 2 years and everything with the recovery. I think that is incredible. And what you're saying there, the connection with the mind and body, that is very relevant for people to understand that aspect in particular, because people don't. So it's really good to touch on it. Okay, so moving forward into a couple of other things there as well, and I always appreciate the vulnerability of sharing things like that, by the way, I must say. I know it's part of your story, I know you speak on it, but nonetheless, I do appreciate that. What was I going to say? Yeah, so going forward a little bit, we were touching on the World Championships there, and we were touching on some of your achievements. Just a quick question about the Olympics themselves, though. I would just like to get your thoughts on how you would describe the atmosphere and the overall experience of an Olympic Games. And with this, I don't have a really narrow question about this aspect or this aspect. It's very much your perspective being there, because most of us mere mortals watch it on the TV. I mean, we don't actually get to like the Olympic Village or the stadiums and the whole. It's not only that; it's the whole atmosphere of people coming together in that way, and the global focus. I think is a very unique energy. I would say personally, for what it's worth. And so, I would like to get your thoughts on just what is it like being there behind the scenes that most of us don't get to see, basically.
Yeah, it's a very unique experience. It really is, without doubt. And that's why I fell in love with it. Watching it on the TV, seeing the history, the drama, the excitement, it's just captivating, isn't it? And so then to be a part of that is just incredible. And so I competed in the Sydney Olympics in 2000 and then in Beijing in 2008. And they were quite different experiences, but what very culturally, obviously. But first of all, in Sydney, I stayed in the Olympic Village, and in Beijing, we didn't. I attended the opening ceremony in Beijing, and in Sydney I didn't. And the opening ceremony in Beijing, the Bird's Nest Stadium, 100,000 people in there. It was just spectacular. And I just remember you're walking into the stadium, you're queuing up with, with Great Britain team. There's other teams before you and after you, and that's when you just start to get to know the other athletes as well. You're walking with them. I remember Tom Daly was with us right near us in the queue in our line with Team GB. He was only like 14 years old, the diver at the time. And I remember, and you're just meeting all these other athletes from other sports. But then we enter into the stadium, and it's just electric. You walk in and you're proud, you're wearing your Team GB opening ceremony kit, and I think it was Mark Foster was carrying the Union Jack flag, and he's leading us in, and you walk in and it's just 100,000 people. There's the roar of the crowd, there's flashlights going, there's the announcer in the stadium, there's the other athletes walking around, and it's just spectacular. And that's a moment to cherish, really, walking in and just feeling so proud to be part of the Great Britain team at an Olympic Games. And then as the ceremony goes on, there's a certain point when all the athletes are in and the ceremony's coming to an end, and you're just mixing with all the other athletes from all around the world. And you're meeting people from different sports and different countries. And that's just, and you're all there knowing that we've all worked really hard to be here. I don't know about your sport and I don't know what level you're at, but just to be here, and whether you win a medal or you don't win a medal, but I know that just to be here representing your country at Olympic Games, I know what that takes for you to have done to get here to this point. And there's just a real mutual respect and admiration for each other. And that just bonds people. And it was really exciting just to meet people from other sports. So that was really cool. And then you're in Sydney. We were in the Olympic Village, so staying in the Olympic Village is very, very exciting as well. Almost a little bit overwhelming at times because there's just so much going on, and it was my first Olympics, so it's all very exciting. And again, this dining hall that you walk into where it's like a food court really, and you go in there and there's literally athletes from all around the world again, and there's every kind of food cuisine that you could think of, but you kind of got to stick to your normal diet and the food that that's going to work for you as you're training, because you're not on holiday, you're here to train and to compete. But it's just, again, it's very exciting, but it's really a challenge to try and stay focused and not get carried away with the excitement of being in the village and seeing famous athletes. And I remember queuing up, and well, actually, the room next door to us was Tim Henman and Greg Rosetsky, British, tennis players, famous at the time, and you walk along in the food hall, and I remember seeing tennis players and track athletes, and just and it's all very exciting as an athlete. It was for me, but you're just, at the same time, just trying to stay focused and absorb it and enjoy it, but not get carried away because you're here to race. So it's a real balance. But yeah, just an incredible experience.
That is wonderful. That is really wonderful to hear about it for the for the behind the scenes in that element. Now, one of the other things, Anna, is obviously, as I said at the beginning, you give back and you contribute to a lot of other people, as I've already mentioned. You do a lot of motivational speaking, and you'll have your own definitions and explanations for that. But let's just say that from my side, looking at what you do, you make a positive impact on a lot of people, and I love that. I would like to touch on really two sides of this question. I mean, one of them is the inspiration as to the motivation to actually do that, because not everyone does it, even when they've achieved things at your level. So I would like to touch on that, but I would also like to touch on some snippets of some of the key lessons that you actually like to share with people. We won't have time for all of them, but like I said at the beginning, some of the things that you regard as essential ingredients for success, happiness, even to a certain extent, what your definition of success is. So there's a few things to go in here. I don't want to make this a too big question. Let's start with where you began with motivational or inspirational speaking. And let's start with the reason why that you do that, because I think it's a very powerful impact that you have on the world. So where did that begin for you, please?
So the very first time I was asked to do a speech at a conference was with my sponsors, actually. It's a company called Alpha Graphics, and they invited me to, I think it was Cancun in Mexico, to go and speak at the sales team conference. And I'd never done anything like it before, so I was really nervous, but I really enjoyed it. And that was, I was still competing at the time, and I did a little bit of that whilst I was competing. And then when I finished, I realized that I'd learned a lot. I'd spent 15 years at the highest level of my sport. I'd worked with a sports psychologist for since I was 16, 17 years old. Um, so I'd learned valuable life lessons about how to achieve at the highest level, how to thrive and perform under pressure in challenging environments. I'd learned about what made a really great team and what made a bad team. I was part of good teams, I was part of unsuccessful teams. I worked with inspirational leaders, and I realized that there was so much knowledge there that I could share with others about how it could apply to their world. Most of my work today is done in the corporate world, and I have done a bit with athletes in sport. But it's all applicable no matter, what world you're in. It's about learning the behaviors, the actions, the skills, the attitudes that allow you to deliver exceptional performance. And whether that's in another sport, or whether that's in doctors in NHS, or whether it's in bankers in the financial world, it doesn't matter. Anyone who's trying to perform at their best can develop. I talk a lot about mindset, and it's your mindset that determines your success. And so anyone who's willing can develop a winning mindset, and it's just about learning what those strategies are. So, and then when I began to do that, and now I know I'm not just a speaker, but I'm also a leadership coach, I'm a training consultant, and so I work closely with people, and I love seeing that impact. I get a real kick out of, the people I work closely with, say one-to-one coaching. I see them again and again, and over a 6-month period say, we see a transformation, and we see them reach their goals. We see them build their confidence, and have the courage to step out of their comfort zone to achieve their own goals. And that's really rewarding for me. So that's why I do it. I love it. I'm passionate about it. And I just, my career was very much all about me and me achieving success. And now I get a real sense of achievement from helping others achieve success.
Absolutely. I love that. And your passion for it really comes over in a wonderful, very tangible, warm way. And that's amazing in and of itself. So I love the work you do. And as I've already said several times in this talk, very, very inspiring. So with that, to go into a couple of lessons here, I mean, obviously, I know that if people want to learn properly, they need to contact you, they need to reach out to you, and we'll give a mention to that later on. But if there were a couple of things, as I've said, essential ingredients. You said there about people changing their mindset and upping their performance, all of these kinds of things. I mean, if someone is already performing to a certain level, as we've already said, not just in sports, but you said, bankers, doctors, any walk of life, and they want to up that, what are one or two things that you could share here that you would regard to be essential advice in that area, please, to help people?
Oh, it's difficult to pick just one or two things, as you heard earlier. I find that hard. But
Right.
let me give it a go. So I guess where I began was really dreaming really big. I wanted to become a world champion. No other British female kayaker had ever done that. I wanted to become an Olympian. So this was about aiming high, and I think that's a really important place to start. And I know that some of your audience are young athletes, and I think quite often we're afraid to dream big, to aim high. We're afraid that we might fail, and if I put that out there, and what if I don't achieve it? So I think that it takes courage to aim high. It really does, and to really commit to that. And but it's so powerful because there's no point, aiming low and hitting it. That, yeah, great, but actually let's aim really big and let's reach for the stars. And you might reach it, you might not, but you'll get along, you'll get further. And also, when you're in a team, and if you're leading a team in the corporate world, then you'll also inspire others to aim high. You'll inspire them and foster a culture of ambition and accomplishment. So that would be my first step. But it's also just one, aiming high, but two, being really clear on that goal and where you're going, because that's what really gives you the motivation when times are tough, when on those days when you're feeling like I just want to give up. When it's really tough, you've had the setbacks, knowing why you're here and why you're doing it and why it's going to be worth persevering, why it's worth the struggle is really important. So, or when you're overwhelmed and I don't know where to begin, it's like being able to focus on what's important. And this is where I need to put my attention today. So we have to have that clarity of where we're going and why. Um, I think also then once we've got that clarity, it's about getting other people on board as well. Because I might have been in the boat on the start line on my own, but I didn't get there on my own. I had a whole team of people from my parents, my family, my coach, the physio, nutritionist, sports psychologist, all of these people helped me to get to the start line and win medals. And so, what was also really important is that team, they were also aligned in the goal. Yes, I had this goal to become a world champion, but it wasn't just my goal, it was our goal. And that's really crucial. Again, no one gets to the highest level on their own. So, and whatever walk that is in life. So you have to have a team of people around you. And I think this is also about, collaborating as part of that team, getting all of those people on board, getting them aligned, getting them to work together. That was really crucial. I'll give you just a couple more. One of the behaviors of, talking of teams, that the best teams that I was a part of that was consistent across all of those teams was feedback. And I think in sport that comes pretty naturally, but outside of sport, it's not always common and frequently given and received well. Yet in sport, it's we call it the food of champions, and we feed on it and we crave it because we know it makes us better. And in my sport, we were getting feedback all the time. You've feedback, whether that's from a GPS on the boat or heart rate monitor, or from the coach on the bank, or from the sports scientist when they come in and show you results of testing we've done. We're always getting feedback. And sometimes it was really hard to hear, when the coach tells you feedback about your technique or about part of your race, or when you're in a crew boat in the doubles or the four, and we're getting feedback, and sometimes you don't like hearing it, but you need to hear it, and you need to hold an open mind and listen to it and take it on board, because that is the only way you're going to improve. And I talk about this a lot with leaders in business, because ultimately they need to be giving feedback to their colleagues, to their teams, to their peers, because that is the only way they're going to improve and keep raising performance. So the final thing really is about having a mindset that is always seeking improvement. And that, yeah, because that's what feedback's about. But it's about how else can I improve? Recognizing that even when I get to the highest level, there's always room for improvement. I became a world champion, but if I wanted to win again, I needed to keep improving, because the same performance is never good enough to win again the following year. And you can't just assume that it's just going to happen again naturally. You've got to keep exploring, pushing boundaries, raising the bar. And that's a mindset of seeking constant and never-ending improvement, and thinking about what can I learn from, who can I learn from. I haven't got all the ideas and all the solutions yet. I need to keep learning and growing and improving if I want to keep raising my performance and that's how I won 6 world championships, not just one.
Love that. Very, very powerful. And as I said at the beginning, and a very powerful advice for any life area, and definitely something people should listen to and make notes. Very multifaceted. So absolutely, I appreciate you sharing a few snippets there, because I always say when I do these, if it touches even one person, then we've done some good work. And I know it will be more than that, but at the same time, the good thing about putting podcasts out there is obviously the timeline. Somebody could listen to this 5 years from now at a point when they're ready to hear it, and they might not be ready to hear it today, or somebody else might be ready to hear it today. So it has that sort of long-term appeal. So when you're sharing lessons like that, that's my reason for asking, because of that kind of impact. Now, obviously, if people do want to know more about these kinds of things, they need to hear you speak. They need to join up with your programs or anything like that. So, I mean, I know that you're not exactly hard to find or anything. We just need to Google you and you come up. But at the same time, when it comes to people getting involved, or if there's people out there who want to book you for any of these corporate events, or in terms of like what you were saying, teaching doctors, bankers, groups, and not only athletes, or book you for speaking, or any of these kinds of things, in any way, shape, or form that people would like to get more personally involved with what you do, how can they do that? Basically, what's the best way to do that?
So my website is www.annahemmings.com. Really simple to remember, annahemmings.com. And yeah, so there's lots of information on there about the work that I do in the corporate world. Yeah, helping leaders and teams to develop the skills and the behaviors to be high performing. So I speak at conferences, but as I said, I also work as a leadership coach and a training consultant. So I founded a company called Beyond the Barriers, again, beyondthebarriers.co.uk. So you can find me there. I'm also on LinkedIn. That's my social platform where I post every day, sharing tips and actions and lessons and behaviors around how to be more resilient and high performing in teams and as leaders.
Wonderful. Well, I will say to our audience, guys and girls, get involved and basically plug into the journey, you know, because Anna shares some great stuff. There's a lot that you can learn from. And I mentioned that, Anna, again, because, you know, some people will feel that pull, you know, to want to get involved more personally one way or another, like you say there, whether it's connected on social media or whether it's actually coming to, you know, a workshop, an event or whatever else. So anyway, really glad that we've given that a mention. Like I said at the beginning, today, very much an overview, but we've shared some good stuff. You've shared some amazing stories from your journey and you've shared some great lessons. And those were my kind of twin ambitions for every time I do these, you know, good, amazing stories people don't get to hear every day and life lessons. And we've ticked those two boxes and then some. So I know that with people who've achieved as much as you have, we only sort of scratch the surface in like 45 minutes when I do these talks. But at the same time, I'm very grateful because what you've shared today are things that people can take away and practically apply, which is the most valuable aspect. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And the last thing for me to do is just to say a big thank you for your time and a big thank you for not only making the time to do this, but speaking from your heart so much about your experiences and being such an open book about your experiences, all of that kind of thing. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Liam.
Absolute pleasure. And you have a great day. Thank you so much. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel and there'll be more videos coming soon.